water. Juan.
Okay, thank you very much. So, hello, my name is Merelo. I'm going to talk about the Raku Documentation project. That's why I'm calling it Doc-Sing or Doc-Ching or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm kind of the Raku Dotcher in mischief. And yes, that's a thing because I just made it up, so I can say it's a thing. I am also a writer of important things. So you work out acronym. I'm also author of this book. It's an excellent book. There are 6 quick syntax references. And I'm contract bound by the publishing house to talk about it. So please buy it. Please make reviews of it. And please, I mean, it's a very nice book, actually. So it's a very complete book talking about all the excellent and awesome things that Raku has. But let's get to the point. I'm going to talk, I mean, my talk is going to be divided in 3 different parts. First one, I'm going to talk about the documentation project and how it works. Second, I'm going to talk about how the physical part of writing the thing actually works. So how you get to something that's code, to something else that's reference or tutorial or a way to use that code to produce a program. And eventually, I'm going to talk about 1 or maybe 2 futures for the documentation project or for the Raku documentation. First thing, documentation is important. It's a very important thing. So it's something that you need to have. It's something that needs to be there. And it's something that sometimes is taken as a given. I mean, when you use many languages, even Perl itself, you say, okay, so there's documentation here. So it's a great thing. But someone is writing that documentation and you need to have some way of, let's say, to have a vision for what documentation should be and what documentation is going to be. And also, you really have to document everything that's in the language. Because if it's that no documentation, no one is going to use it. So how do you do that? So what's the way of doing this kind of thing? Well, this is going to be the first part of my talk. So we are going to talk how we get to from the raw material, which is the documentation, to the actual thing that most people see, which is the website. So first thing is, this is pod 6. It's what we use for writing documentation. It's called pod 6 because it was based on pod, on Perl's pod, which stands for plain old documentation, maybe something totally different. But there are many nice things, and maybe you can check them out in this little excerpt of code. First thing is that you see that behind pod you have this thing which is actually a hash. This is actually metadata. So within the documentation you can also have metadata. So you can describe stuff about the content that's there. Also, of course, you have the structure, right? So you have the title of the documentation page. In this case, is the class failure. It's one of the classes that's in there in Raku. You have a subtitle for it, so you describe what's on it, and then you have something that behaves as code, which is this one. This is actually the declaration of the class, and so on so forth. You have word level markup. For instance, this is code. This is italics. This is a link, and so on and so forth, right? But that's a very interesting thing about this pod 6 and about documentation in Raku in general. And the thing is that it's part of the language. If you think about pod, or if you think about documentation in any other language, it's basically a comment. It's an inner thing. It's something that you throw away when you compile a page. That's not the case in Raku, and that's one of the cool or the bad things. Actually, it was the cause why documentation wasn't written at the same time as the language, because at the beginning the compiler was very slow. So if you had to compile the code and the documentation, it was basically impossible. So documentation is not really embedded or entangled into the code. It's something that's apart, right? So, but this is also a very interesting characteristic of Raku, and it's something called a braid. Braid is kind of different languages that are also interpreted by Raku, so that documentation and this POD6 is part of a set of braiders that come by default in Raku. The other one would be regular expressions, for instance, and another one is, curiously enough, quotes. So quotes have their own little braid or little language. So this is what we have, right? So we have a thing that it's around 400 pages of documentation so far. So it's on the ballpark of 500. This is what we have, and this is what we want to have. We want to have something that's searchable. So we want to have something that when you get to a website, you can search for failure, right? And you get directly to the page that's there. You want also, and somebody's buzzing the main door. I am not, okay, I'm going to continue. But this never happens. I mean, nobody lives here. So anyway, so you want it also to be findable. So you want, when people looks up in Google or in DuckDuckGo, you want them to find actually the reference. So you want them to find what you are looking for, right? So you want it to be published in such a way that people can actually find it. But you want also it to be indexable, because documentation is nothing without a good index. You need to have some pages that have an index of everything. You need to have it nicely classified so that you can look it up and you can have several facets of navigation through the. And then you need to have a real reference. So if there's something called define, you should be able to look it up easily, and you should be able to find it. And it should have a very nice page where everything that's defined can be found, right? So what do we need? We need something which is called Documentable. Documentable is a tool, and it's also a Raku library. It was mainly the work of Antonio Gámiz, who was a Google Season of Code alumnus last year. But as a matter of fact, it kind of put together many things that were there. But what we want with Documentable is kind of an API for documentation. So what we want is to have a way of actually putting everything together and making it easily usable from other modules, and easily to have an easy way of producing everything that I have talked about so far. So this is class Documentable. So we have is something like pause, something like kind, something. So this is what that code that we have seen so far, that POD6 code, becomes when we are actually processing it. So this is actually literary programming. So this doesn't mean that you can't use this POD6 within your own program. Actually, you can intersperse it, and every little comment in the thing, every little comment in your, it's going to be parsed. So it's literal programming. You can actually include all those data structures and all the kind of documentation structure within it. So it's a very interesting concept, and it's something that we can work with, and we should really work with it. So what do we do then? Remember, documentation is code. So we can actually precompile it. We can cache it. So in the same way that you can install any module, we can do exactly the same with the documentation. So instead of going through the text every time, parsing it, creating the AST, everything, no, you already have that. You have the bytecode. You can store it. So that's the first thing you do. We kind of marinate the documentation same way that this salmon is marinated. So we marinate it and we put it into a series of files. This was actually the work of mainly Antonio Gámiz was the higher level thing, but Richard Haynes' work actually did something that was called pod to cache. This is probably going to change in the future, but for the time being, the basic idea is you have a documentation, you cache it, so the next time you need to work with it, you don't have to compile it all over again, which was very slow, but you just use the cache you already have, right? The second thing is you have to register everything, because remember, you have to index everything we have so that we can easily reference it. We can easily create pages or a feed. We can easily create this little search slot that we have in the page. So we use something which is called the Documentable registry. So the Documentable registry is like a higher level thing where you have all the data structure and all the things that you have extracted out of that documentation data structure, right? And then we use the cache, as I said. So this is actually part of the Documentable code. So what we do is we need the cache, we initialize the cache when we start to work with it. And then, well, when we produce new documentation or whatever, the only thing we need to do is to look at the cache, see if it's current. If there's something new, you update the cache, and then you produce the new pages quite easily. So you parse, you index, you repeat, you do that all over again. So one of the good things about Documentable is that before we needed to process the whole thing all at once. There was no way, no physical way of just refreshing the HTML pages that were generated from one single document. Now we can do that, so that in fact, if there's only one page changed, only the pages that have been created from it are going to be changed, and do that all the time, anytime you need it. Eventually, you need to generate HTML, so that you have to work with the data structures you have to work with the templates, and you have to take into account several things so that eventually you produce something there. So this is the text that produces that kind of thing. There's something weird there, but anyway, looks like it's going to work anyway. So what you have is something that's called a secondary. So we have the primary, which is a synthetic page that we generate, for instance, for reference or whatever. The secondary is actually, the page we generate from that, and then we generate HTML. So eventually, what you have is an HTML page that's eventually published. This takes, right now, it takes around like 4 or 5 minutes, not so much actually. This is if you generate the whole documentation from the 400 or 450 documents. If you are just going to generate like 1 page or 2 pages or whatever, it takes maybe a few seconds. So it's really, really fast. Before it took like 20, 30 minutes. Was absolutely amazing. So you see, actually did this a while ago. So this is what you do. You process different directories, and then you eventually generate HTML, and then you ship it. So you copy it to the infrastructure that's provided by Roman Baumer and Atom. So we're very grateful for that. But you see, it's just static HTML. So there's nothing dynamic about it. I mean, this is quite good because it's safe. The only thing you need to deploy is an Nginx server, and then to some kind of, let's say, configuration about it, because you need to add some suffixes and things like that. So it's no big deal. But with this, you deploy and you have HTML pages, and it's quite fast to serve. So that's quite good. I think that might change in the future, but for the time being, I think it works pretty well. We do this by hand, by the way. I do this by hand. So that's something that could improve in the future. But then, so you actually need to write the documentation. So it's something that's the technical part, but there's also a kind of, let's say, development part where you actually need to write the documentation, right? So the first thing is that you need to find out about what needs to be documented, right? So it's the thing is that with finding it out is that you need to know what new features are there. So when something changes, you need to know that it's changed. When there is some change in the syntax, when there's no some new feature, whatever, you need to find out. I mean, it's not like you are kind of walking through the source code or looking up every commit. That would be absolutely, time-consuming, and it would be impossible. But you need to find out when this documentation is changing or when something is changing. How do we do that? The way we do it now is that we find out changes in release change logs. There is a change log document every time there's a new release. For instance, there was a new release of Raku last week, 2020 .06, and we parse the changelog using this script. It's just this script. There's nothing much more to it. So the changelog contains all the changes that have been made, new features, some syntax. Of course, it contains something else like performance improvements and things like that. We're not interested in that. I mean, we're not going to change the documentation to say this is faster, and then again say this is even faster. So it's just when the syntax of some methods, some routine changes or stuff like that, right? So this is something that we can do. The key here is that in this command, in this statement, we actually link the commit where that change was made. This is essential because we need to understand why something has happened in order to document it. This is relatively recent, so it's not something that we have been able to do it forever, but it's something that's very convenient now. So from this, we produce a markdown document. This markdown document is copied and pasted into an issue. So every time there is a new release, you get this fresh list of things that you need to change into documentation, right? With a checklist and everything, and you can work on that. That's very good, and that really helps a lot. But once you have that, or even before you have that, there were some things that needed to be documented, and they are not in those release change logs. So you need to really find out what something does. And then you find something like this. For instance, you need to find out when you do a concatenation of two junctions, what's going to happen. Good thing is that most of Raku is written in Raku. So no big deal. I mean, it's the same language. But there's a part of it that's written in NQP. NQP is not quite Perl, so it's like a simplified language. It's the one that actually generates the bytecode. But I mean, check this out. This is only like the first quarter of the thing. So if you need to parse this down, it's going to be hard. So it's hard to understand what this does. So you can just say, okay, so what I do is I concatenate two junctions, and that's it. But that's someone finding this could already find that out just out of the signature. So you really need to find out what it does, right? In this case, you might want to find out what it does in many different ways. You have to use the context, right? And blame helps with the context. So you can go to GitHub, you can using directly Git. You can use git blame, and in this case, what you see is that Elizabeth Matthijssen did this change, this specific change, did it 3 years ago, and did it with this specific commit. So you kind of find out where that was done. You can even go a little bit further and say, okay, what was the commit message that did it? And you find this very helpful. I mean, everything that Liz writes is absolutely excellent. Everything most people write in Raku is absolutely excellent in the commit message. It really helps, but in some cases, even more so if it's old code, it's difficult to find out. But overall, if there are several layers of code with different time, written at different times or different ages or whatever. In this case, say, okay, so what it does is I'm going to work with junction.str and str junction and whatever, so I know what this is doing. And this kind of provides an explanation, kind of provides a little sentence that you can reuse for the documentation. But you can go even a little bit further than that, because the problem with code is that not everything in Raku is Raku. That might seem like a paradox, but it's exactly like that. Why? Because the specification is not the same as Raku, is not the same as implementation. There are 3 different things here. First is the specification. Specification is something that needs to work in a particular way, needs to work in a specific way. The specification is in rows. It's a rows repository. So if something is in rows, you know that it's going to work that way, it needs to work that way, and you also have an example, which is helpful. In this case, you have this example right here, so you can actually go and use directly that example for documentation. That's actually pretty good. But in some other cases, it's not Raku, it's Raku, right? That means that it belongs to the Raku implementation, but it needn't be there in the future. So you have done something because it's helpful for as an auxiliary class or whatever, and people can use it. So it's exposed, it's published to the public, it's a public API, and people can use it, but it's Raku, so it might change. If it's not a spec, if it's not part of the specification, it might change, right? And then there are implementation issues. There are some things that are done because they are convenient for implementation. In some cases, they are user-facing. In some cases, they are not. And you need to document them or not. I mean, it's in the case of Raku implementation, it's really a judgment call. So you really have to think about, and that's why it's a matter of priorities, because the first thing you need to document is spec, then Raku, and then eventually documentation. Fortunately, very recently, we have something that was called is implementation detail. So we really can find out when something is an implementation detail or not. We'll get to that a little bit later. Of course, you need to understand what it does, because since 2 or 3 examples, 2 or 3 very single examples, doesn't mean that you understand what it does. It doesn't really mean that you can explain what it does, because at the end of the day, in the documentation, you need to explain. You need to tell people this is doing this kind of thing in all these cases, right? And just representing the syntax and doing what was in the specification with slightly different names, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough for people to really start to use that particular feature in their code, which is what we are looking for in the documentation. So you really need to find out. You need to understand the code, right? And then eventually you need to produce examples. There are examples all over. I would be hard-pressed to tell how many, but they are probably in the tens of thousands, probably like 40,000 or something like that. And every one of them needs to reflect, needs to show intent, not syntax. Syntax is easy. You just look out the reference and say, okay, so what I put here is a type, what I put there is a kind of thing, and I'm going to get an array out of that. So you create an example with some array called foo and bar and bus, and that's it, and you're done. And it does something, and it doesn't crash. So it's okay. But you actually need to tell people how to use that in their code. You need to express intent. You need to express an actual use case. So, for instance, this one was done by Altaiman, Alexei. It's actually it shows how is implementation detail works. That's a trait. It was introduced very recently, like a couple of releases back. And it shows, for instance, that you have failed, which is a call routine. So you check it out, and you see that failed is an implementation detail. And then you show something that's called a private calculation. It's not cool. It's not foo. It's not bar. It's private calculation. So you know that something is a private calculation, and that's the kind of thing that's an implementation detail, and that's the kind of thing that you should use is implementation detail with, right? So instead of just using foo and bar or whatever, you show that people, if they are going to put something in their implementation, and it's going to be an implementation detail, which means that it may change in the future. So it might. It's something that was used, was done for some reason. It's not a spec, so it can be used exactly this way. So this is a very good example, and this is what we are looking for. Not all of the examples are like that, so we're trying to improve them, and you can really help if you see some example that's not this kind of thing. If you see something that's less than awesome. Please, just tell us, raise an issue. It's a living thing. It's something that's evolving all the time. It's changing. So we really need help. We need all the help that we can get. Besides, if you create an example, it can go viral. So just think about it. seeing your statement or two statements repeated over and over again in Stack Overflow questions in some other code that because at the end of the day, people start to work on their code by taking the examples that are in the documentation or taking something from a Stack Overflow, then maybe modifying it just a little tiny bit. So as a matter of fact, I have seen examples of this all over GitHub. So if you look up the code of particular examples in the documentation, you look them up in GitHub and you will find 3 or 4 copies or whatever. So it's not really like viral, but little tiny bit viral. What we have now is around 100,000 lines of documentation, which is a lot. It's like a pile of books, big pile of books. Actually, I just discovered today that we have 100,000 lines of documentation. So I think that sometimes in April or maybe May, that line was written. Remember that I would say that around 10K lines of documentation are produced every year, which is a good thing. I remember when I started to work in the documentation, it was around 70,000, something like that. So in 3 years, it's been 30K more, and that's a good thing. And it's because lots of people are working on the documentation. We have 13.5K commits. That's not like a lot. I mean, if you look at, for instance, a Raku, there are around 33K lines of code. I mean, commits. In this case, it's 30.5K. Could be better, but still, I'm relatively happy about it. And there are around 262 contributors, and 37 in the last year. So 37 people have contributed in the last 12 months, and I really thank you for that. I mean, it's really good. I mean, the thing is that part of documentation is very nice because you learn lots of things about the nuts and bolts of Raku. You get to check out amazing code. You get to interact with amazing programmers and so on. But some parts of it is really groundwork. If you have something like a method that has changed in 3 different classes or in 5 different classes, you really have to go through that. I mean, just if you look at, for instance, at the specification of Perl 6.d, that's still not done. There were around 260 different features that were introduced there, and we are 8 features short of producing documentation for 60, which was released in 2017, right? No, 18. So we're still, I mean, we're a bit behind. What I'm saying is that it's nice work, but it's volunteer work, and I'm really grateful. And the Raku community is really grateful to all these people who really sometimes have to sit down and write some stuff that at the end of the day is some hard work to do. But let's look into the future. I think that there are many things that can be done in a better way. Of course, what we are looking for is more documentation, better documentation, but we also want to have something like more automation. Kind of, for instance, there are most things are not automated right now. So just imagine that someone creates a new syntax or a new feature or whatever. Right now, what we are doing is every time there is a release, we manually check out the change log and see what's there. We might miss some stuff, and also that has been done only in the last 2 years. So I mean, it's not really a lot of time. So we should really find a way of comparing the documentation with the source code and finding out if there's something missing there, or if there's something wrong, or many other ways. I mean, for instance, if some new stuff is produced, if some new method or whatever is there are parts of documentation which is just boilerplate. This method is called that way. This is a signature of the method. It does this and that. I mean, that kind of things could be, at least initially, be produced automatically. I think that's something that we need to do, right? Also save some boilerplate. Writing. There's some boilerplate, for instance, documentation which describes all the classes that are super classes to a particular one. You need to write that into a different file, and that, I mean, that's something that we have been wanting to change for a long time. If you use introspection in Raku, you can get that very easily. So it's something that could be done. I mean, really many things. I mean, we could use introspection. We could use parsing of Raku by Raku. We use many things to at least produce some initial documents or some boilerplate that you have to fill in, which right now we are not doing. I mean, there is a script that produces like the template for a documentation page, but that's it, and that's not nice. So we could save a lot of stuff. So part of that grunt work that we are doing could be saved. Second thing, I would like something like the great unification of docs, which is something that we have been looking for some time. It's going to start being possible right now. Basic idea is that right now Documentable is written for documentation, and that's it. So if you want to produce documentation for your own module, it's going to be hard. So you will have to ask Antonio and me and some other people, how do I do this? How do I do that? So it's not like you can simply point Documentable at a repository or whatever. I want the docs of this, and it produces very nice HTML. I would really love to have something like that. It's even a little bit worse, because right now there was something called P6doc, which stopped working, but then right now we have a Raku doc. Raku doc is also looking at the documentation from the command line, and Raku doc should be unified in a better way with Documentable, which right now is not really like that. We have a P6doc. It's still on the repository, on the Raku doc repository. We should work on that and take it out and use Raku doc. Anyway, the point is that we should have like a unified way of working with any kind of documentation within any kind of module, using any kind of template and using it very easy. So that's going to be real good, and we have it. And finally, we have to streamline release and deployment. Right now, we really don't have releases. We have releases, but they're kind of a joke, kind of a checkpoint where I say, okay, so I'm going to stop right here. We want to remember what happened this specific moment in time, so we are going to release this. But we don't really have releases. So we can't really say that right now we have the 6D release of the documentation, because for starters, I mean, the specification is not really documented, so we can't really do it. The second thing is that it should kind of be easy for people to just install the documentation. Yes, self-install doc, and that's it. You install documentation. Right now you can do it, but you will still have to produce the HTML documentation, and at the end of the day, it's much easier to just look it up on the internet. So we should really work on that. It's something that, and of course we should also streamline deployment. Right now it's done by hand, because why is it done by hand? Well, we could probably do it automatically by polling the repository every time, but sometimes the state the documentation is in is not really the best one, because you want to fix something before it's deployed. So, I mean, both things go hand in hand. You can't do deployment if you don't have a release strategy, and the other way around. And you should have kind of a quality check before you actually deploy something. You can just deploy every time something goes to master. Or if you deploy every time something goes to master, you should have a development branch and work on that, and not work on the master branch, which is what we do now. So that's something that we would like to have. At the end of the day, I think that Raku is really an amazing language. For me, it's been quite a discovery, and I have been, working with many different languages all my life of programmer, and Raku is really an amazing language. But it really needs an amazing documentation. So it's something that we need to do. It's not something that we have. I can say that, I mean, documentation is good enough. It's it's what we have, but we really need to work on that, and the whole community needs to be aware that by having an excellent documentation, more people will be able to use the language, more people will be introduced to the language, and less people would be discouraged from using the language because they don't find a real way of performing some operation that they want to do. So we really need your help. You can help in many ways, but just looking at documentation, finding out something that is not really right, creating an issue, even submitting a pull request, you'll be very, very welcome. Thanks a lot for attending this talk. I'm done now, and I think we have time for a few questions.
If you have a question, either raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hi, JJ.
Hi.
Let me start my video. I asked some questions in the chat about literate programming versus braids, but I guess the more general question I wanted to ask was, I think you can get a lot more people participating in documentation if you have just a very simple way to allow users to write Markdown and have it automatically converted to a Pod 6 language. And I was just wondering about your thoughts on that. Is that something that I've completely missed, or is that something that just still needs to be done?
It needs to be done. I mean, you're very right, because Pod 6, if you look at it, on the face of it, it's a complicated language. I mean, it's a markup language. It's got lots of stuff, going back and forth. So some people might say, okay, so I need to do this, but how do I really put code here? It would be nice if we had Markdown. The problem is, again, to streamline that kind of thing. So to actually create a workflow that allows people to write something in Markdown that's converted automatically into Pod 6, and then to be able to introduce it into the. I mean, it's something that we could give some thoughts, and it's a really excellent idea. I really love it, but off the top of my head, it would need some serious tooling for making it work. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a comment, and that is the need for examples in the documentation is really great. There's so much stuff that once I read it, I still have no clue what it means and what to do. And it'd be nice because the features look really good.
Yeah, it's something that we can provide example for every single thing that we have there, but still we try to have as many examples as possible, and that those examples are really usable quite directly. As a matter of fact, we compile every single example, so we make sure that every single example is really there. I mean, and can really work with current. So yeah.
So yeah, that's about it.
So if we have no more questions, okay, go ahead. A question or feedback, Martin, too?
No, sorry.
Okay. So we have plenty of time for questions. If you have some, feel free to raise your hand or speech. Otherwise, I think we can close the session earlier.
Hey, I'm not sure. I just wanted to say thank you. It's been Documentable represents something that I was dreaming of for the documentation, like 5 or 6 years ago. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work, and we'll keep pushing more documentation as a community. But
yeah, please, and you're very welcome to help. Thank you very much.
So we have a Michaud. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I have a question. So first of all, JJ, Wow, you guys have done a great job with the documentation. I use it all the time. and that's saying something coming from my history with Perl 6 and Raku. With respect to the question about making good examples, first of all, we all know it's really hard to come up with good examples. If somebody said, I really wish there was an example, I really could use an example on such and such page, is there a process, or what would be the process to just be able to get a note to the people writing documentation that, hey, this is a spot where we could really use an example? Would it be by filing a GitHub issue or what? Yeah, exactly. Just filing an issue would be. Yeah. Of course, right now we have 440 issues, so it's not ideal either. But we'll eventually get down to it. I mean, sometimes just people pick up issues and they start to write it down. Sometimes the persons who have done it actually in Raku see it and say, okay, so why not write an example here? But the right way is doing an issue. Because it's there and anybody can pick it up and work on it. I think I might work on some issues. Thank you. That would be. I think that would be a lot of fun, and it would be somewhere where I think I can come in and especially help do some of those. So sure. Thank you very much. Again, great job to everybody who's working on the documentation team. I really do use the site a lot. Thank you.
It looks like some pages on the docs have an edit button that immediately you have to be logged into GitHub but you can edit a page that way. What does that do exactly? Well, it creates a pull request. Actually, what you are going to do, all the pages that are not secondary pages that have not been generated from something else, actually, they take you straight to the page. Just give me 1 second because my laptop is running out of juice, so I need to plug it in. So the thing is that you go straight to edit the page in GitHub, and if you have the prefs to edit it, we just go to master. If it doesn't, it will create a pull request, and the pull request will be reviewed by me or someone else, and we'll check it out and we'll suggest maybe some changes or whatever. So, but yes, please do that. Please, by all means, if you see something that's wrong, even a typo or some grammar error or whatever, just do it. As soon as you do the pull request, we will run some tests on it. Basically, some style. Well, we have some standards also those are kind of enforced. And then we approve it, and it's published in the next release. So please do so. It's something that's been there from the very beginning, and we are really grateful for any contribution that comes that way.
Bruce, go ahead.
Thank you. This ties heavily into Michael's question and into your answer that you just gave. My history with the documentation is, besides contributing some years ago a good bit, at all the hackathons in several years, I've tried, anytime somebody comes in and says, I want to do something on Perl 6, but I don't know what, I put them on the documentation. And that has the dual effect of, we get beginner's eyes, that effect you can't duplicate, because you and I can't read the documentation and find errors that they could spot, because we've read it too many times. But also because then nobody gets more than 10 minutes in before saying, ooh, that's cool, how does that work? And then they're off on some actual coding project. But for people who do want to participate, do you have a how to contribute document that summarizes essentially the answer you just gave to Michael of, okay, the way you contribute to this stuff is click this button, and here's where our standards are, and so forth.
Yeah, it's right there in the repository. It's a contribution guide, and it explains what Spot 6 explains, kind of small standards that we enforce on the documentation, and so on and so forth. But and we have also used it in sometimes we did that thing called squashathons, which we stopped doing for some reasons. So I can kind of look it up and paste it on the chat if you want, or maybe share it. But yes, we have that kind of thing. In general, you know, if you look at the documentation and you have some contribution that's grammar or something like that, you know, some mistake, for instance, in a variable name or whatever, we just accept it straight away. So it's not something that goes through many layers of approval. So I mean, just encourage people to change whatever they want. I mean, at the very worst, somebody will tell them, well, maybe you should do this or that way. I mean, but most probably it's going to be accepted almost straight away.
Okay, I'm looking more towards people who will go through and say, I read that and it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what I should put in its place, but that I want to alert somebody that does not communicate what I think it's supposed to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's thing would be to raise an issue.
Okay, so issues and the contribution guidelines, that's the on-ramp. Got it. Thank you.
That would be it. Thank you very much.
Hello,
Another
JJ.
question.
I have a question. I have a question about. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My question is: do you have a statistic what pages of documentation, or maybe what topics or chapter are most visited in a web? You say about web pages. You have a web documentation, and it's very interesting what pages are more usable and what pages web users look for. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of do, because for some reason Google started to send me reports of what people were visiting. I really don't know why, because we don't have any kind of you know, this bug that we put on the pages so that Google finds out everything everyone is visiting. I would have to look it up, but I will get back to you later. I really don't remember. I don't have time to look it up. But yes, we have some kind of report. We also have the logs, which, to tell you the truth, I don't really look up. So if I remember correctly, most people start by visiting one of the index pages, like, for instance, tutorial pages about the language, input, output, things like that. So it's not like they are really trying to find some specific class or anything like that. But I mean, it's something that we really need to find out, because we need to make easy for people to discover things starting from anywhere on the site. So if we find out that some specific page is the entry page for almost everyone, we should really take care of that and you know, work with it very carefully so that it's easy for people to use and to go to other places if they are not actually trying to find that out. So the thing is that we don't want to introduce any tracking code into the pages, because that's to give Google or any other company all kinds of information about what people are visiting or why. But still, we can use the logs and check it out, and it's something we should really do. So it's a good question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being there, and thanks JJ for your talk. That was very good.
Thank you.
See you to the next talk.
Okay, Camila says goodbye. Bye bye.